All right, let's get right into it. We're going to tackle a question that trips up a lot of people who buy, sell, or even just rent a place. We're talking about the law of fixtures, and we're going to figure out what's actually yours to take with you when you move out.
So let's say you're selling your house and you spend a ton of money on these amazing custom-built kitchen cabinets. They're basically the heart of your home. Can you just take them with you to the new place? Well, the answer isn't as simple as you'd think, and it all comes down to one little legal idea.
And that idea is called a fixture. Honestly, understanding this one word is the key to figuring out the whole cabinet situation and, avoiding some pretty major arguments down the road.
So what even is a fixture? In the eyes of the law, it's something that's been attached to the property so permanently that if you tried to rip it out, you'd actually damage the place. It's the total opposite of your personal stuff, like your couch. You can just pick that up and go. But a built-in bookshelf that's bolted to the wall, that's probably a fixture.
This all leads to a really simple test that courts use. It all comes down to one thing. What was the intention? Did you install that item thinking it was going to be a permanent part of the house? If you did, then yeah, the law is probably going to see it as a fixture.
So let's go back to those kitchen cabinets. They're a perfect example, right? They were literally built for that specific kitchen. Same deal with a big gate that's cemented into the driveway or a chandelier that's been hardwired into the ceiling. You can't just unplug it like a table lamp. Taking it out would leave a hole and a bunch of wires. The whole point was for them to stay put.
And this whole idea is not new at all. In fact, it's based on a really old, really powerful legal principle. You could almost call it the golden rule of property law.
And that principle is wrapped up in this old Latin phrase, quid plantatur solo cedit. Okay, I know it sounds super formal, but trust me, what it actually means is super simple and has huge implications. It just means whatever is attached to the land becomes part of the land. That's it. So the second your beautiful custom cabinets get bolted to the kitchen wall, the law stops seeing them as just cabinets. It sees them as part of the house itself. And here's where the rule gets, well, kind of harsh. Once something becomes a fixture, it automatically becomes the property of whoever owns the land. And here's the real kicker. The owner doesn't have to pay you a single cent for it. You install it, they own it. The end. So as you can imagine, this is way more than just some dusty old legal theory. This rule has huge, real-world consequences, especially in a couple of situations where there's a lot of money and emotion on the line. This whole fixture business really gets critical in two main spots. First, when you're selling a property. Everything that's considered a fixture is automatically part of the deal and goes to the new owner, unless you specifically write it out of the contract. And second, and this is where things get really sticky, is at the end of a lease. Yeah, let's focus on that second one because it's a super common trap for people who rent. We can call it the tenant's dilemma.
So the starting point, the default rule, is that any fixtures a tenant installs become the landlord's property once the lease is up. I mean, just think about that for a second. You spend your own money to put in a nice new ceiling fan or some custom shelves to make the place feel like home, and when you move out, you might legally have to leave them behind without getting any compensation. But it's not always quite that clear-cut. The law isn't a total brick wall on this. See, over time, the courts started to realize that this strict rule could be really unfair, especially for businesses renting a space. So the law changed a bit. It started allowing tenants to remove certain types of fixtures they added, things like trade fixtures for a business or even ornamental ones, just as long as taking them out doesn't wreck the place. This change points to a bigger safety valve built into the legal system. What happens when following the rule to the letter just creates an outcome that feels totally wrong? Well, that's when a different principle called equity can step in.
And this creates this really interesting push and pull in the law. On one side, you've got that strict rule. The fixture belongs to the landowner, tough luck, no money for you. But on the other side, you have this idea of equity, of fairness. A court can actually step in and say no to a landowner if forcing the rule would be, and this is the legal term, unconscionable. Basically, if the result is so ridiculously unfair that it just shocks everyone's conscience.
Which brings us right back to today's problems. What about that smart thermostat you hardwired into the wall? Or those cool custom shelves you built in your home office? Are they fixtures or are they yours to keep? Well, now you know the test. So the next time you decide to improve a property you don't own, you gotta ask yourself that all-important question. Was this thing meant to be permanent?